And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge Parish Chapter is dedicated to fighting for the survival of America by unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend and take back their parental rights at all levels of government. To learn more or to get involved with Moms for Liberty East Baton Rouge, email momsforlibertybatonrouge@gmail.com. That's moms, the number 4, Liberty Baton Rouge @gmail.com. The email address is on the Patriot page of our website, freedomstate.us, and it's in the show notes. Joining us today is someone we've had on the show before. He's a constitutional attorney. Mr. Paul Hurd will be with us to get us up to speed on the highly contested new congressional map. Before we bring on Paul, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 to 17, and it says, "So I kneel humbly in awe before the Father of our Lord Jesus, the Messiah, the perfect Father of every father and child in heaven and on earth, and I pray that he would unveil within you the unlimited riches of his glory and favor until supernatural strength floods your innermost being with his divine might and explosive power. Then, by constantly using your faith, the life of Christ will be released deep inside you, and the resting place of his love will become the very source and root of your life." This passage is Paul praying for the early Ephesian church. He asked that the Lord would reveal his unlimited glory and favor that is within them, because it is that revelation that allows us to tap into the supernatural strength and power of the Lord. It's hard to wrap our minds around, but the scripture also teaches us that the same power that raised Christ Jesus from the dead lives in us. That's the Holy Spirit. He goes on to say, to share another key for us in verse 17, that it is the constant use of our faith that releases the life of Christ in us. We become more like him. We tap into a greater measure of Jesus's love and power and being when we walk in faith. So that's my prayer for all of us today, that the Lord would bring us a greater revelation of his glory and favor within us, and that we would discipline ourselves to walk by faith and not by sight.
What a beautiful, beautiful prayer, Danielle. And I love the way that you made the connection between walking in faith and the release of God's supernatural power and grace in our lives and in our hearts. And it is so true. Faith is the key. There's no question about that. And without faith, which releases that supernatural power, so many of the issues that we're facing now in our country and in our state seem just almost insurmountable. But our guest today, Paul Hurd, absolutely walks in faith. And I tell you, when he testified before the legislature against this, now signed new congressional map, he exhibited a lot of ability and a lot of supernatural power. I had the ability to testify against that legislation as well. Paul, what a pleasure to have you on for the second time now, sir. How are you?
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Nobody said this was going to be a sprint. It looks like we've got a constitutional marathon going on, and we like our pace. We think we're going to finish well.
It looks like, Paul, that our group, LACAG, me, and you ended up being right, at least insofar as the Fifth Circuit's concerned, that this new map that the legislature drew up is in fact unconstitutional, does violate equal protection. In light of the Fifth Circuit ruling, it was appealed up to the Supreme Court, and now the Supreme Court seems to invoke something called the Purcell Doctrine, which is going to allow this unconstitutional district to go forward, at least in the short term. Tell us about what's happening and what you expect coming down the pike.
Okay, the court we have is what's called the three-judge panel, and it's a hybrid. It's not the Fifth Circuit. There's certain cases that go to three-judge panels, and quite frankly, it's to allow, even at the district level, to make sure one judge isn't making the decision by himself. There's a lot of issues judges have to decide, but certain very important ones and political ones, including statewide districting plans, if you challenge them in federal court, you get a three-judge panel. So we have one Fifth Circuit judge, but we have two district judges. Those three judges made the decision that you were talking about, or maybe was attributing to the Fifth Circuit itself. It's not, it's this hybrid. But the interesting part about the three-judge panel process, and this is not the only, districting is not the only time that three-judge panels are used, but when you use them, your appeal is automatically to the U.S. Supreme Court. It doesn't go through the Fifth Circuit or the Fourth Circuit, wherever you are in the nation, the Ninth Circuit, if you're in crazy California. It goes directly to the Supremes, and that's what happened in our case. And we were disappointed that the court honored, if you will, I'm being respectful here, less than 6 months before we won the case on the merits, and we went up and we said, we need a remedy now, we have time. That was in February, that was in May. And last October, the Secretary of State's office said, as long as we could get a plan in place by the end of May, the first week of June, that was enough time. She being Nancy Landry, unrelated to our governor, but Nancy Landry, the Secretary of State, could conduct an election timely. Lo and behold, they decided to help their case on Purcell that they had to have it by May 15th. And so they moved it up. They swore that was true. And the Supreme Court accepted the word of our elected officials and said, if the elected official says to the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court authorizes the local judge to enact a new plan, the state itself administratively will not be able to do it properly for the voter. Well, it put the Supreme Court in a box that the Supreme Court doesn't know how long it takes to get voting machines to the parishes, to get them checked at the warehouse, to get them out of the warehouse, get them to voting precincts. It had to take the Secretary of State's word. And the Secretary of State certainly used its bureaucratic slothfulness as an excuse not to give us a constitutional district. So yeah, we're enjoined by the Supreme Court. But it's very annoying that in 6 months they just lopped off the last 6 weeks that we knew we had to have done a constitutional district.
Yeah. And Paul, but to be clear, and thank you for clarifying the panel, 2 federal judges and a Fifth Circuit judge. But that panel is is as far as the constitutionality of this new map, that is the last word on it as of now. The U.S. Supreme Court has simply said you can go forward with this district because of the constraints that the Secretary of State outlined. But at some point, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear the merits of the constitutionality of this new district, right?
Oh, that's absolutely right. In the next, I'm trying to think of the exact date. I think by the first week of July, which is pretty soon, the people who lost, the defendants who lost on the merits in the court, have to file their first pleading. It's called the jurisdictional statement. They'll file it. Once they file it, it will tell the Supreme Court why the Supreme Court ought to take up the appeal and ought to reverse. All right, they'll do that. We will then respond in later July, and this case will then be ready for the Supreme Court to do one of two things. What we'll file will functionally be a motion to affirm, and that would mean don't take it up on briefs anymore. You've got briefs on the stay. You've got briefs with the jurisdictional statement and our reply. That's enough for the Supreme Court to be fully informed. They could look at the record at that point and say, we affirm the district court. They do that. We're through with the Supreme Court. That's their appeal. The appeal is denied. The district court is affirmed. We will be back in a Shreveport court, Shreveport or Lafayette court for the 3-judge panel to draw a remedy district, or the legislature again has the constitutional authority to come in and try to do it a third or a fourth time. But that becomes a 2-year cycle. The legislature's regular session won't be until next February or March till June. And so it's likely that the appeal will be taken care of. The election will occur under this unconstitutional racial gerrymander, no matter what. Then either the legislature, next legislative session, will draw a new map. The governor can obviously call another special session, or the court will draw a remedy.
Is there the option for the 3-judge panel to take a look at the last map and say that the one before this map was actually constitutional and just institute that one?
Once the appeal is through and the underlying ruling is upheld, they've got plenary authority to draw a constitutional map. They could take that case, but if they did, they're going to have to be willing to deal with some of the, remember, it never went to trial. The previous plan was never held unconstitutional. It was Judge Dick, under a Section 2 claim, alleged that she believed it violated Section 2, and therefore she was going to void that 2020 district, and she was going to draw her own plan. Well, between the legislature and a 3-judge panel that gets multiple eyes on the issue, the drawing of the map by a single judge is the one most likely to have the opportunity to be very variable, different directions than what would occur otherwise. There are standards for the district, for the court that's going to draw a new plan. There are jurisprudential standards. And what it says is, while the legislature is free to do its will, it can balance policies and populations anyway, the interest of the populations anyway it wants, not federal courts when they're redrawing districts. What they need to do is fix the gerrymander. And part of what we were that I think is likely is that District 1, District 2, and District 3, in even SB 8, the unconstitutional one, but the one last enacted by the legislature, those 3 districts are not impacted by the racial gerrymander of 6 that invaded 5 and 4. So 4, 5, and 6 could be reshuffled, and only half the map would change. That's a possibility of what could happen by the judges, as opposed to a full legislative rewrite by the legislature.
Yeah. What is your prediction, Paul, with regard to how the U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately rule? Obviously, your arguments were sound, and you are joined by many other constitutional scholars in believing that this new map is unconstitutional. Any indications or inclinations about what the U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately do with regard to this map?
I would say this: while a case is pending, no counsel of record is going to have an opinion about what his court's going to do. We stand by our arguments, our evidence. It's clearly drawn based upon race. One thing I wanted to just mention is there's been some discussion about, oh, golly gee, some of the Republicans, including the governor or somebody, and got mad at Garrett Graves because Garrett Graves sided more with Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker of the House and not Congressman Scalise or now Speaker Johnson. That was had nothing to do with the drawing of the 6th Congressional District. The 6th Congressional District was drawn as a majority-minority district because that's what Judge Dick said. If you don't do it, no matter what else you draw, if you don't give me a second majority-minority district, I am going to void that as an ineffective remedy, and I'm going to draw my own. So there's no question that the target, the sole motivational reason that we had a special session we had to redraw was to meet the demand of a racially drawn district. Now, in Louisiana, you cannot draw, and I've been doing this since the 1990s. The computerization of this thing in the last 30 years is just phenomenal. You cannot draw a relatively compact district 6 map in Louisiana and get 2 majority-minority districts. I'm not even sure the new District 2 is constitutional, but we'll leave that because it at least has a historic basis of having been drawn originally out of Orleans when we had 7 districts, or maybe even 8, but we had enough, which makes them smaller, which made it easier to do a majority district in New Orleans that wasn't racially gerrymandered. It just took in the greater metropolitan area, and it happened to be majority black. All right, so we're now at a point where you can't draw one and not have to go outside regions, outside, and divide cities and divide parishes. Our parishes are pretty powerful entities for Louisiana politically. They're every bit as strong politically, historically, and how we govern ourselves locally. Very, very dominant existence. And you've got to divide them up. You've got to divide the cities up. And you've got to make little bitty bridges where you get cows, but you don't get people, so that you can connect those little bitty dots of different minority pockets and desegregate. Segregate your cities all the way from Shreveport down through Alexandria, down into Baton Rouge, down into Lafayette. It's just, it's undeniable. It's a racial gerrymandering.
So there's no way then, Paul, there's no way in your view constitutionally to create an additional majority-minority congressional district without racial gerrymandering?
Without exceeding the standards of excessive racial gerrymandering, that if you look at the plans that the defendants had offered in the Judge Dick litigation, they're all racial gerrymanders. The answer was, which racial gerrymander did you want? Was Judge Dick going to pick? And the legislature accepted their burden, their racial instruction, and they complied with it. And what I was going to finally end up with was the state at the end tried to say, oh, golly gee, the state really did this because they were mad at Garrett Graves. Malarkey. There was nothing in the typical political fight and competition between the Garrett Graves and Scalise and Johnson that in any way was anything abnormal. Sometimes when you're competing for the highest office in the House, feelings get hurt. But that would never, the Republican Party, the 2/3 majority Republican Party would never have said, oh, well, Congressman Scalise and Congressman Johnson are mad enough at Garrett that we're going to give away a district to the Democrats.
Right. That's shooting yourself in the foot.
If you have ever wondered what the definition of collateral damage was, once they decided they had to draw a majority-minority district, they knew they were going to draw a district that was likely going to elect a Democrat. But not because it had anything to do with the political side of it, but because it had to do with the racial. Once you decided that, hey, it's like musical chairs. There's 6 chairs. One of them has been a majority-minority district. We're going to make 2 of the guys and ladies left. Somebody's not going to get a district. And so Garrett was the one that was sacrificed, but it's not. It's because he's in Baton Rouge, and the base of this new racial gerrymander is in Baton Rouge. He wasn't killed as an independent reason for this redistricting. In fact, it was the single worst adverse effect that this redistricting had was to eliminate Garrett Graves. But that's the political side, not the motivation of the legislature.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying that, because we've heard that a lot from people, that theory that it was political retribution, but it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all for that to be the case, because it only puts us in a weaker position with regard to Republicans.
Well, and without Judge Dick's order standing, when Governor Landry called the special session, he said, we're here because Judge Dick has ordered us to draw a second majority minority district. If we don't, she's going to. We want to do it. All the rest of it is collateral damage. I mean, you were told you had to speed. You drove your car too fast and you killed a dog. You didn't speed so you could kill the dog. It's just collateral damage.
Yeah. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. And Paul, you talked earlier about the fact that this is an unconstitutional map, and we believe that it is. And it sounds like from what you're saying that we're going to be stuck with an unconstitutional representative in our state. In your view, should somebody bring a challenge against this Purcell doctrine because it's favoring the administrative state and obviously disenfranchising voters?
No, all the Purcell, you won't get anywhere. I mean, it's created by the Supreme Court, and you're going to end up at the Supreme Court asking them to change their mind. The point of the Purcell is right. The underlying facts, I believe, were grossly exaggerated. We all know if we had this hearing and we had this trial and candidates had already qualified under the existing plan, they had already put out their campaign signs, they were all doing their ads, and then the court ruled this is unconstitutional. All Purcell says is, no, it's too late. Remember, the focus for Purcell is the voter and the system of getting candidates identified, getting voters time to make their decision. There is a time frame as you approach election day that it's too late to change this one for the voters' sake. Instead, we've got to stop. That's all Purcell is. Now, I cannot believe that my qualified, talented, and experienced Secretary of State in Louisiana needed May, June, July, August, September, October. She needed more than 5 months, almost 6 months, to be able to change one map on a ballot 6 months from now. Her explanation, if she'd have wanted to have this election, would have been, I think when I did it 30 years ago, and we set aside almost this same district, we had the trial in July, and the judges still ordered a new plan, and the election was conducted. And so the sudden inability to get to work and do your job, the Supreme Court didn't have any way to disbelieve the Secretary of State, and it was it'll be a disappointment in her career that she'll look back at and say, that was not my best day.
Yeah. So the Supreme Court, Paul, could have ruled on the merits of this, and the Secretary of State would have had plenty of time to make adjustments and to make sure that the congressional map at issue was constitutional, could have come up with something that was acceptable.
That what the voters got to vote in was constitutional.
Right. But they chose to defer to the Secretary of State because, as you said...
I don't want to say defer in some sort of personal way.
No.
The answer is they've got 50 states to look out after, the Supreme Court. The governor and the Secretary of State say, oh, golly gee, trust us, Your Honor. We're in Louisiana and we just can't get it done in 5 months. Bless their hearts.
Bless our hearts.
Bless our
Bless
hearts.
their pea-picking heart.
Well, Paul, if the SCOTUS does agree with the Supreme Court, SCOTUS does agree with the Fifth Circuit, forgive me, would this force a special election in 6 months or a year? Or are we stuck with this unconstitutional representative for a full 2-year term?
I think it's likely you're stuck with him or her for 2 years. But the one good news would be that next year there will not be a presidential, there will not be a congressional, but there will be elections next year. There'll be state elections, and it may be the slowest of the 4 years. 1 year it's president and Congress, 2 years later it's Congress, and one of those years in between is state. That was 2023. Well, there is the slowest year has only municipal and special elections. That may be next year, but the answer is we certainly, if the Supreme Court affirms the 3-judge panel and the appeal is over and we're back to a remedy, this election will occur and the remedy will be determined by March or April next year. And then I know we'll ask for a special election because we have time. And if we can get it decided early enough to hook on to the election cycle of the fall of next year, you could conduct the special election and have a constitutional representative.
So there's a possibility that no matter who wins this race, in the middle of a term, possibly he or she could be faced with a special election in the middle of a congressional term.
They may have to run 3 summers in a row. This summer, next summer, and then the next summer would be the regular election. And that may be what argues against the court ordering. We cannot have that special election unless the court says this district was bad enough, we need to get a constitutional election conducted.
Wow. Now, for those of us who've been following this closely, we saw that State Senator Cleo Fields announced right after Governor Landry signed the map into law. It was either the same day or the next day. And recently, I think last week, former State Senator Elbert Guillory announced his campaign for that seat. So it looks like Cleo's not going to just walk into this one. Do you have a prediction on who might pull it out?
No, I think there'll be some. I think you'll have 5 candidates before it's over. There's 2 more Democrats talking about it, and Mr. Guillory's a very fine candidate. Uh, I think if you end up with 5, because remember, Mr. Guillory's from Lafayette, and Cleo's over in Baton Rouge, and there's 1 or 2 black candidate Democrats up in the Caddo end of the district, the Caddo even or Alexandria, the northern end of the gerrymander, that think that maybe they could get in and protect their population and their voters and squeeze Senator Fields out in Baton Rouge. And if you cut it up in thirds, we could get a Republican in the runoff, and the runoff is in December. And it's usually a very, very low turnout. And so this would be one where the election could be a manageable election for a black Republican or a well-known Republican that has some contacts throughout the state.
Yeah. Definitely not open and shut for Senator Cleo Fields, for sure.
You know, he's got to remember the FBI has the picture of him taking $25,000 in cash, stuffing it in his pants, and leaving Governor Edwards' office. I mean, golly gee.
He is definitely not without baggage. That is for sure. Paul, do you know, as this new district stands, what is the racial demographic? Is it 58, 40? What is the percentage breakdown, black and white, in the new district, if you know?
We don't. I'll say this: when you're doing these, you don't worry about the gross pop, because what we have factually is the black population as a whole is a slightly younger population as to non-African Americans. Meaning this: if you have a 50-50 population district, at voting age, and that's what you'll hear, black voting age, or BVAP, voting age population. That's what we all turn our eyes toward on these districts. And it's a 55, I believe, 55% black VAP district right now.
Yeah, so clearly a black Republican, in order to win, would have to turn a percentage of voting age black voters to the Republican column in order to win the race. I was curious about the percentage that they would need to flip in order to be able to get through that.
Take the polls that Trump is doing right now. If he is in fact able to garner 15-20% of the black vote, and a acceptable Republican candidate in that same district did the same thing, you'll have a Republican representative of that district. So it's not undoable. In fact, I've encouraged people to say, don't believe yesterday's politics. There's a real movement of the middle class, the Christian families, the moral, traditional culture population not being satisfied with the Democratic Party anymore. And that's exactly why this could be the election upset of the week or the month when we have this election, is if President Trump is able to pull that population because of the Christian population, the Catholic population of Louisiana could really be a turning point in this election.
Yeah. The assumption being, of course, that if you're going to have significant numbers of Democrats or traditional Democrat voters voting for Trump, it would be somewhat incongruous for them to then go down the ballot and vote for a Cleo Fields.
And vote for your favorite FBI guy.
Vote for your favorite FBI guys. So exactly. Well, we're going to continue to follow all this very closely, Paul. We know you're at the tip of the spear on all of it, and we're just excited about having you back on. And as things develop, we will, of course, be calling you for some more updates and some more insights.
Yeah, I love the work y'all are doing. I'm glad to be a small piece of it on the redistricting side. If we can help any other way on some of these other constitutional issues, man, I'll be glad to help. Glad to give you some insight into what else is going on at the Supreme Court.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. We will be tapping into that and taking you up on the offer.
You got it. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.